Kia ora, I'm Mari, and today we're going to talk about transportation within New Zealand. I really feel like if you come to New Zealand, you're going to want to travel around and see multiple cities and lots of different places, so you're definitely going to have to figure out how you're getting around. So first I'll talk about transportation within a city, and then I'll talk about transportation between cities. Within a city, most of the cities have buses, a public bus system, which in my experience are very easy to use, pretty cheap, and yeah, clean, tidy, no problems. I've never had a problem on the bus. They go pretty much all the places you want to go, and yeah, I found them easy to use and nice. In Wellington and Auckland, they do have some trains, but I think mostly they're used by commuters going to work and going home and all of that. And in a few cities, they have ferries that are used as transportation as well. If you're trying to just go around a city, also walking, never underestimate walking. It's a great way to see a city. And in the big cities now, there are the electric scooters, electric bikes, regular bikes that you can rent. Yeah, so there's a few options for that kind of thing as well. Now, between cities, there are a few options. For one, you can take buses. There's a few different types of buses, so it just depends what you're into, what you might do. So there's one company called Intercity, and they have routes all throughout New Zealand, and they pretty much just get you from point A to point B with minimal stops along the way. You have the option to buy just per ride, so you book it kind of the same way you would book a flight. You put in your starting destination, your arrival destination, and then it will give you times, and you pick the time and the price and all that. They also have some packages that you can do if you know you're going to be riding a lot of buses. That could be a more cost-effective way to do it. So it just depends what you're looking for. When I first came to New Zealand, I used a lot of intercity buses, and I found them very good and reliable and easy, and I kind of like just zoning out and looking out the window for a bit. I think that's nice. They will stop for toilet breaks and lunch breaks, so you're not just like stuck on this bus the whole time. Another option for buses that if you come here you will see them all over, there are buses, they're kind of more like hop on, hop off, tour-esque, but not tours. There's the company called Kiwi Experience, there's one called Stray, there's probably others I'm not sure of. And these are buses where you kind of pay for a whole price up front. Like you do like a whole kind of package deal up front, and there's always usually some specials going on, so look for that. Or if you're staying at a hostel, if you book through them, you might get it cheaper, so look around for that if you're interested in this option. So this kind of bus is kind of a whole experience. Usually you're kind of traveling with a group of people, but it is a hop on hop off thing, so you can get off somewhere and stay longer if you want. And they don't just get you from point A to point B, they kind of make a lot of stops along the way, so it could be a cool way to go do and see more things without having a car. Most people who take these kind of buses are going to be younger people, maybe around 20s. They're very social, so it might be a good way to make friends. If you like going out and having a good time, it's a good way to kind of do that with a group. And I think usually you stay at hostels together with the same people that are on your bus and all of that. It's like traveling with a group, but you have a little bit more freedom. From my understanding, that's what it is. Those kind of hop on, hop off packages can end up costing a little more than if you were to book all of your travel kind of separately, but you're also paying for the experience and the accessibility and just the different factors that go with that type of bus service. So, something to think about. There are some trains that go throughout New Zealand, so that could be one option for you to travel and get around. However, they aren't wildly used. They don't go that many locations. It's kind of more of a novelty thing, and it could be a really cool way if you love trains and you love sightseeing. I really actually want to try out some of the trains here, but as far as using it as a main means of transport, they're not actually ideal. But they could be really fun just for a cool activity if you're interested in that. Since New Zealand is made up of mostly the North Island and the South Island, if you want to go to both, you're going to have to get across the island somehow. One option is the ferry, so there are a couple different ferry services that offer transportation between Wellington and Picton. It's about a 3-hour ferry ride. It can be really awesome, or I've heard some horror stories depending on the weather and the waves. You can also fly between cities within New Zealand. If you book in advance, sometimes you can get really cheap deals for flights. Jetstar and Air New Zealand are the main two airlines that fly around here. Jetstar sometimes has some really cheap deals. Just be aware that usually baggage is not included. That will be an extra cost. So if you have baggage you need to check, just factor that into your cost. So if you book in advance, or sometimes you might just get lucky with a good deal, it can be very cost effective. Sometimes though, if you don't book it in advance, it's not going to be your cheapest option. But if you're short on time and you want to see a lot, it might be your only option. So the last way to get around New Zealand is with a car. You could get a car or a camper van. In this way, I'll treat them the same because we're not talking about accommodation at this point. Before I talk about driving in general, just know that driving in New Zealand is different than other parts of the world, especially if you're not used to driving on the left-hand side of the road. That is a challenge already. The road signs can be different from where you're from, and just things like that. The roads are often curvy and windy, going up and down mountains. Usually there's only one lane going one way and one lane going the other way. There's not really like big highways except for maybe in Auckland. The roads are small and busy a lot of times. A lot of travelers using the roads who might not be familiar. A lot of big camper vans on the roads, a lot of trucks on the roads, all different kinds of things on the roads. You have to be so careful. Before you start driving in New Zealand, brush up on road signs, driving rules, and just kind of get familiarized with that for yourself. Driving can be very unsafe here if you're not prepared, so just not to scare you, just be prepared. So you pretty much have two options. You can either buy a car or a van, or rent or hire a car or a van. I think it really depends how long you're going to be here, which option you're going to do. If you're coming here on a working holiday visa, or you're moving here, or you're going to be here for at least a month, I think buying a vehicle is a really good option because there are so many people coming and going from here that a lot of people are buying and selling cars all the time. So a lot of people will come here, buy a car or a van, and then right before they leave, they'll sell it. And then it's like basically like free transportation the whole time besides gas because you're getting your money back at the end. So it can be a really good option. There is also a lot more risk involved with that. If you do want to buy a car, you can check websites like Trade Me. That's kind of like a Craigslist website. I would also recommend checking out Facebook groups. So there's one called like New Zealand Buy Sell Car or something like that, and people are always listing their cars that they want sold. And there are people that are just like you who have traveled around, bought a car, and now they want to sell it. So it's kind of a good way to do that. In Auckland, I know there's like a big like car sale lot thing. I think happens every week. Look around on the internet wherever you are and see what kind of car selling options there are. If you are going to buy a car, some things to look out for is make sure it has a warrant of fitness or a WOOF. This is really important because it's necessary to drive a car here that has a valid WOOF, and it's the government's way of checking to make sure the car is safe to drive. So you definitely want a car that's safe to drive. It also needs to have a current registration, so make sure the registration of the car you're buying is as good for as long as you're going to be here, ideally longer, so you can sell it again later. Otherwise, you'll just have to get that updated before you sell it. And as always, you probably want to get it checked out by a mechanic and all of that. Just make sure it's in good working order. You can never be too safe, you know? Insurance for cars is not mandatory here. However, it's always recommended, especially at least third-party insurance, which means that if you cause an accident, you're at least insured for the damage to the other person's car. Yeah, so at the bare minimum, that's good, because if you're just traveling and you get into an accident, that's just going to be all of your budget right there. So be very careful and cautious with that kind of thing. Up to you, but know the risks. So if you're going to be here for a shorter time, or you don't feel comfortable buying a vehicle, then renting a car is a good option. There are a ton of different rental car agencies. I'm not an expert at those, so please don't ask me advice for which ones you should use. Read some reviews and kind of just look at what's best. There's a lot of also van rental companies, and again, yeah, just pick out what's best for you. Most people that come to New Zealand, you're arriving off of a really long flight. It might not always be the best to just start driving immediately right after your long flight. So maybe when you first get in, take a bus to your accommodation or a taxi or something like that. And then the next day you can pick up a car when you have a clearer head. Something to think about at least. And if you're coming in winter, there may be times that you need chains for your car. So just be aware, if you're picking up from a rental agency, you might just want to check on that, look at the weather. And if you know you're going to be going up and down any passes, chains will be a good thing to have. If you are driving, just know that gas, or petrol as you may call it, is pretty expensive here. So while driving can sometimes feel like it's going to be the cheapest option, especially if you have like a large camper van, it's probably not the cheapest option. So you should definitely factor that in to your cost consideration when you're budgeting for your trip. So I hope that gave you a good overview of transportation within New Zealand. If you have any more specific questions, leave it in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. And I hope you enjoy your trip to New Zealand or your move to New Zealand or your time in New Zealand, whatever it may be. If you're not subscribed, then subscribe to this channel for more travel tips, especially about New Zealand. Happy travels and safe travels. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye!